Well, I am Michael Feeley, and I'm a former UK police officer in two of England's biggest cities, which is London and Birmingham. And I spent 17 years on the front line, and as a result of that, I saw every aspect of humanity, solved many different levels of crime, different bits of crime. And my background is investigation and finding evidence and piecing that evidence together, which is something that I do now in relation to not the criminal world, but I now do that in relation to the ancient world. I was born in Walsall in the West Midlands, which is really the industrial heartland of England. I was the only child of a working father and a full-time mum. So my background really is humble, nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary. So I can't remember anything as a child other than certainly from the age of maybe 6, 7, having many sort of silent adult conversations with myself, thinking that I wasn't from here, which I think it goes more than just a childhood imagination. It was a deep innate knowing that I wasn't from here. There's something amiss. I was questioning how things were, even at that age. You know, I used to watch famous films like The Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston. I remember sitting there watching it, more not from an entertainment perspective, but from an inquisitive questioning aspect. How can somebody part water? You know, did these stories really happen? Do these characters really exist? And this was from the age of 6 and 7, just sitting there in my own solitude, in my own room, having these adult conversations. I've never sort of seen myself as a psychic or as a medium. I think a lot of people quantify psychics and mediums as being a stage presence. You know, is Edith around today? Is Ethel coming through? And a lot of people associate that with mediumship. The information that I get is clearly of a channeled nature. Now I can be sitting here in this room and things will pop into my head, and there'll be real deep information that pops into my head, and this formulates a theory, this formulates an idea and how things are pieced together. If you imagine the American detective shows where you have a detective in the room with a mosaic and he's piecing all of these different things together, well, that happens inside my head, literally sometimes just sitting here, or I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll have to write things on my phone because there's information coming. I'm getting mathematical symbols, which when I look into has relevance to the past, to my past, to the ancient past. I'll get all kinds of symbols or mathematical equations to work out and information coming through. And that can be in a sleep state or it can be in an awake state. So I've been told that if I didn't have mediumship abilities, then I wouldn't be receiving the information that I get. But I don't class myself as a medium, although just like anybody else, sometimes they're switched on, sometimes they're switched off. Why did I leave? I met the wife in the police, which once I met the wife, I started to realise that there's more to life than a job, than a career. And I think it really changed my outlook, it really changed my reality and the way that I saw life. I was once just married to that job. I was going to be there forever, and that's all there was in my life. And then when you meet somebody, your focus is somewhere else. Now, probably about the last 12 to 15 months of my service, I left in sort of mid-2009. The last 12 to 15 months of service saw a lot of bitterness, really, where I saw lots of figures being manipulated, when I saw crime figures manipulated deliberately, when I saw what is known as response times deliberately manipulated. Now, response time is if somebody calls an emergency number, the 999 in the UK, then you have something like 10 minutes from the time of the call to the time an officer is at your door is 10 minutes. Now, there were also graded responses called early responses, which means it's non-emergency, but you need to get there sooner rather than later, so they give you 30 minutes from the time of the call. Now, what I was finding is if we weren't meeting the immediate response within the 10 minutes, those figures were being manipulated and they were being downgraded to what is an early response. So it looked like we were actually meeting our targets every time. We had what is known as KPIs, which are key performance indicators, and that is the likes of Class A drugs. It can be vehicle crime, burglaries, robberies. There's certain crimes that are classed as a KPI, which is what the Home Office judge police forces on. And what I was finding and what I was personally witnessing is crimes were being renamed, reclassified. So what was a KPI was being reclassified as a non-KPI. So the KPI figures looked like they were shrinking when they weren't. It was just being renamed. And I was finding all this sort of low-level corruption and all this manipulation. And the way in which the service was being run, any sort of public service in this country, you speak to anybody, the fire brigade, nurses, doctors, ambulance staff, they will all tell you the same thing, that the way in which it's being run, it is not being run as a service. It's being run as a political hot potato, but it's not a service. And all of these things really were changing my personality to something that was unrecognisable. I was becoming very ill-tempered. I was becoming very angry because I can't stand injustice, and I was seeing lots and lots of injustice in the way in which the service was being run. Now that in itself would normally be enough to make someone leave their job. In addition to that despondent, there was lots and lots of things happening that you would only describe as paranormal, supernatural. Really, they're not paranormal, they are simply normal, but we would deem them as paranormal beyond scientific understanding. And there's all these things happening. I was seeing, as I say, we went to Rome on a city break, saw UFOs in the sky above the Colosseum. As soon as my wife and I met, something happened. Now she'd seen lots of things as a child and growing up. I don't remember seeing anything as a child or growing up. But as soon as we connected, something happened, something changed. And literally everywhere we would go, we would have some kind of experience. Whether that is UFOs coming out of wormholes in the sky, whether that's shadow people walking past us, whether it's UFOs in broad daylight, cigar shapes, dimensional gateways opening. On night duty, being witness to a potential landing, coming back home, discussing that with a local UFO group who we'd had contact with, then literally watching all our emails be removed and then replaced as we were watching them, as if they were copied and put back, as we were discussing emails with a local UFO group about a potential landing while we were on night shift. Having our phones tapped, landlines, mobile phones tapped, having anomalies in the electrical wire box for the phones outside our house, having engineers come out, finding these anomalies and saying that shouldn't be there, I'm going to take that with me. So having all of these things where you'd say keywords on the phone and all of a sudden it would start to click as if certain buzzwords, certain keywords would activate our recording. So we were being sort of monitored and lots of things were going on. My awakening really happened at this location inside there, and we'll go in just a moment. And just to give you a bit of background, from a young age, the wife lived in an area that was the scene of Victorian England, and throughout her life there was for want of a better phrase, a ghost girl that she'd been told by various mediums that was attached to her, was around her. And certainly in later life, when she attended mediums, they mentioned this girl as being an attachment, and she was told that this girl wanted her death looked into. So of course, when the wife and I got together, I sort of inherited this drama, this scene. And I also went to see the medium, and this girl appeared in my reading as well. And again, she wanted us to look into her death. As she said, she'd been taken by the hands of another. So without any sort of particular dates, we did have a name, but without a sort of a date of the incident, we decided we would go to the Central Library in Birmingham, and we would look at every sort of death from the Second World War up until the present day, which was at that time 2009, trying to look for any record of death of this young girl. We pretty much spent the whole of the day just looking through registered deaths for the name we'd been given for the area that we knew she probably lived, and we couldn't find anything. So we came away. The next day privately we had a conversation which we thought was a private conversation, where we decided that we couldn't really help this girl anymore and we would stop looking. Pretty much the moment we came home to this location, there was an issue and things started to get pretty angry, pretty nasty for us. We would walk in and the radiators would switch themselves off. I'd sit down and I could actually feel some kind of what I would describe as some kind of possession of my body, and it was making me really angry. Previous to that, and again I'll show you the window in a moment, I'd be sitting on the sofa with my wife and we'd be having a laugh and a joke, and all of a sudden a 6-foot double glazed window just shattered from the inside, and there was no explanation at that time for this. Cut the long story short, we decided we weren't going to help, and things got really bad for us, and on the 8th of February 2009 things took a turn for the worst, and I contacted the medium who'd given us the reading, and we just basically said we need some help. This ghost girl who was hanging around was causing problems, we can't help her, can you help us to send her on her way? And as I was on the phone to the medium, basically everything went calm and quiet, and that is because this young girl had then somehow skipped to where the medium was, and she said, look, she's here with me, and she's upset because you promised to help and you haven't helped. We did explain that we couldn't. We arranged for the medium to come and help us the next day to come to this location, and we thought that would be the end of it. As the day progressed and we're now sort of getting into the Sunday, I think it was the Sunday evening of the 8th of February 2009, things became very uncomfortable in this location, so much so that we couldn't be here. We had to leave, and we went to the mother-in-law's house, which is probably about a 30-40 minute drive from this location, because we wanted to be around people. We felt vulnerable. Now bearing in mind that the occupation we had at the time, which both of us were police officers, we'd seen every aspect of humanity at its worst, and we'd faced some quite terrible things and seen terrible things, and this is the first time in my life really that I'd felt uncomfortable enough to have to leave my own house. We just couldn't remain here, so we went to the mother-in-law's house. We thought we were going to be safe there. The medium was coming the next day, everything was going to be resolved. We just needed to sit the night out. What could happen in the space of a night? So we went to bed about 1:30 that morning, and at about 3:30 that morning I remember vividly being in a wooden bedroom, and the wooden bedroom was a small creaky bedroom, and I seemed to be sitting on a bed, all lined up on a bed this side of the room. In the right hand corner there was a wooden door, and in front of me, maybe even 6-7 feet in front of me, there were blue curtains covering a window. At that point I saw and heard the creaky door open, and as the door opened the curtains moved with the draft, and I heard a young girl's voice who I didn't recognise say, "Here he is." At that point I blanked out and don't remember anything about it, but my wife tells me that I was sitting up screaming hysterically as if I was being attacked. Now when I looked across to her, she was the one who was being attacked, and she was sitting up screaming hysterically. We obviously, after that, we had to get up, we had to switch on all the lights. We couldn't do anything. We were absolutely petrified. This is the first time in my life that I've ever felt fear, I was really petrified. So we told the family, we got up, we were just complete nervous wrecks. But just as we were about to leave, about 10 o'clock that morning, to go and pick the medium up, she called and she said, "Sorry, I can't help you." And as far as she was concerned, that was the end. But let's say that I convinced her that she was going to be collected and she was going to come over and help, bearing in mind what had happened that night. So as we were driving over there, as we reached her house, she was on the doorstep looking very agitated, and as we spoke to her, she said that morning her washing machine had lifted off the floor. She said she'd put a coffee cup in the kitchen, and as she'd gone to retrieve it, it had been put on the windowsill of the living room with a silver spoon that had been placed in there. And she said in all her years as a medium, this is the first time that she had been kicked out of her house. the first time that she'd been so uncomfortable in the spirit world that she could no longer stay in her house. We conveyed her here to this address, and it was inside the living room here that she basically told us the story of this young girl who was named Sarah Jensen. She was aged 14, and little did we know at the time, she was actually around in the year 1850, Victorian England. So it had been 159 years previous to the incident that I'd experienced. Now what I'd experienced, I've been taken back to her time, and I'll go through time and what time is in just a moment, but I've been taken back to her time event, which for her was still happening, but for me it had concluded 159 years previously. So we came back to this house, and the medium said this girl used to be abused by her stepfather, and this particular morning, which was then the 9th of February 2009, 3:30 in the morning, the stepfather had come into the bedroom, which is what I'd seen with the door opening. He'd attempted to abuse her, but on this occasion, unlike all the other occasions, he'd actually smothered her to keep her quiet, and she'd passed away. She'd been smothered and she'd passed away. And I was reliving, or I was witnessing the last moments of her life 159 years previous. This is the reason that we weren't able to find anything that was registered, because we'd only gone back to the Second World War and not to the year 1850, which was Victorian England. The medium then told us that the stepfather, her assailant, was also with us as well in spirit world, and he was the one who'd been causing lots and lots of problems with our relationship. He was the one that had been smashing windows in the house, and basically he wanted to prevent this young girl's story from ever being released. And because we were about to release it, or we were trying to get to the bottom of what had happened, our background was in crime investigation, and we were trying to reveal it, and he was trying to stop that. So again, to cut a long story short, the medium helped this young girl to go to wherever she needed to go, and she had one hell of a fight to remove him from the scene, from the energy field. Now the girl's parting words, and we thought this was extremely strange, was, "Thank you, I'm sorry," but then she says my favourite colours are pink and lilac, and this is what we thought was extremely strange. Of what relevance does that have to anything? And a couple of days later, when we came back home to this home, as we opened the door, there was a pink and lilac flower in the kitchen for us, which wasn't housed, it wasn't there before we left. It had been left by this young girl who'd come back to say thank you. But it took 6 months to get over the event. It took 6 months before I could switch the light off in that bedroom to go to bed at night. And as I say, all the things that I'd seen people walking through walls, shadow people, I've seen spirits, I'd seen an absolute multitude of UFOs coming out of wormholes. I'd even seen UFOs in this patch of sky above us now. Just so many things that I'd seen, and there were so many things following this event that I was about to see. But this was the main event that put me on this path, and it put me on this path of now researching ancient mysteries, researching the wonders of the world, the monolithic mysteries of the world, the true meaning of religious scriptures. But this was where it all started. This is what put me on this path, and as a result of this incident, both the wife and I, really it was the last straw, and the wife and I left our careers as a result. So this location here is where it all started for me, and that was 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago. And this is really the pinnacle of everything that had happened and was about to happen to me. So imagine a bright Saturday afternoon. I'd seen quite a few UFOs at this stage in my awakening in my life, and there were dimensional gateways, things coming out dimensional gateways, all kinds of shapes and sizes, day and night, both at work and not at work. On a bright Saturday afternoon, this area is extremely busy, and I was driving just as I am now, and I was with the wife who was a passenger, and as we come down this stretch of road, if you look to your right, where you can see the Anchorside car park, there were 3 extremely large cigar-shaped UFOs in different parts of the sky. They were completely silent, completely static, and you would have expected it to be like a scene from Independence Day, where people were dumping the cars at the side of the road, worryingly looking at what's going on, calling the emergency services, and etc. But no one did, and it appeared that it was just the wife and I who was able to see these things, and as we observed them for just a few moments, and then they seemingly just disappeared. Of course they didn't disappear, they would have remained where they were, but it was our vision, it was our frequency that was lost, and that's what disconnected from the visual effect. And this is what happens with a frequency based. As humans, we see less than 1% of the frequency spectrum, and a lot of these things that people sometimes catch a glimpse of are really hiding in that 99+% of the frequency spectrum that we don't normally see. And that's what happened on this particular day. We came around the island, we caught a glimpse of them high up in the sky, probably about 600, 700, 800 feet in the air. We saw them for a brief moment, and then we must have gone back to our own frequency and we lost sight of them. What were they doing over a town on a Saturday afternoon? Obviously that is up for debate, but nevertheless they were there. And as I say, at this particular time in my life, in my wife's life, we were seeing things pretty much every day, every other day, day and night. We went to Rome, we saw UFOs in Rome. We went to Jersey, we saw UFOs in Jersey. Of course, later on in life, all of these things had happened to us, and later on in life it was actually explained to me why these things had happened to such a great extent and why they continue to happen. And that was simply because I needed to experience it, I needed to live it, I needed to understand it in order to be able to explain it to others, and in order to be able to educate others as to what is going on in our reality. People these days tend not to look at the sky. Everyone is too focused with what they're doing, focused on their phone, sending text messages, sending Facebook updates, that no one ever really looks at the sky. There is so much around us that we are missing because we are losing our focus, because we are not paying attention to other frequencies. And even the likes of Einstein and Nikola Tesla will tell you, or did tell you, that if you match the frequency of something else, then you will see it. And that's pretty much like a radio station. There's so many radio waves going through this car, through this area now. If we get a radio and we tune into that frequency, we can then hear the radio show, or we can tune into a TV show and visually watch the TV. And that works on the same basis as frequency spectrum. If you match the frequency spectrum of the things that are around you, you will catch a glimpse of it, you will see it. And when people see ghosts, when people see UFOs, when people see like what I've seen, shadow people walking through walls and different things, then of course you are simply matching that frequency base, and we are in and out of different frequencies, and that is why sometimes we can see them, sometimes we can't. Of course, people who have developed their psychic eye, their third eye, which is the whole reason of the ancient past, the pyramids, Stonehenge, the Mayan pyramids, the Heads of Easter Island, the true biblical meaning, which we will go into in different documentaries. They are all talking about our spiritual eye, where we can see and tune into other frequencies beyond our own. So that really is what happened on that day. Just driving normally, going somewhere on a Saturday afternoon in our own time, social visit. We look up and there's 3 gigantic UFO-shaped, cigar-shaped UFOs in the sky. When you're in the police and you're a witness to something, whether that's a witness you're speaking to or whether it's something you've actually witnessed yourself, the first thing you do is document it. And I used to document it with a court appearance in mind. Now, I was considered an expert eyewitness in any court in the UK, and my writing is really geared towards evidential, succinct, to the point. What did you see? What did you smell? How far away were you? What was the lighting like? What was said? That is in my nature as an evidential writer from that kind of career. So it makes sense that when you're witnessing all of these things and they're coming to you so thick and fast, that it's every day or every night, something happening day and night, every day. It makes sense, and it's certainly intrinsic as part of my sort of molecular structure really, to want to evidence that, and to want to document it not only for me, but for people who may well be experiencing the same kind of information. So that's exactly what I did. And certainly the first several books, you know, when Murder Travels Through Time and things like that, were co-written with my wife, because we were co-witnesses, co-eyewitnesses to a lot of it. And we sort of wanted to write, and we wanted to document it, and we wanted to help others to understand what may be going on with them. And that's exactly what we did. So we started writing books, and then a couple of years ago our paths, even though they're still parallel, our paths really sort of separated a little bit, and it was sort of a parallel experience. So whereas in the early days of my awakening, I was seeing lots, experiencing lots, seeing lots, witnessing lots, that sort of diminished, because I think I've seen it now. I don't need to continue seeing all of these things at this advanced level when everything is happening all at once. And I've since been told that I needed to witness it, I needed to experience it, I needed to live it, I needed to be a part of it, because the idea of that is then you're going to be talking about it, you're going to be telling others about what you've experienced. Credibility wise, the amount of people that, when I've done UFO conferences, and even the organisers of UFO conferences have come up and said, a lot of these speakers that we have here today talking about UFOs have never seen one. Now I think from a credibility point of view, it helps to have seen, to have experienced, to have witnessed, to be able to speak about what you've seen. It changed from multiple experiences of the third dimensional kind, really, to getting lots and lots of information and piecing together lots of information about the ancient world and what the ancient world were really telling us, which, you know, the likes of the pyramids of Egypt have millions of visitors a year, the likes of Stonehenge have millions of visitors a year, the Heads of Easter Island have visitors. When you start looking at what is Atlantis, what is Lemuria, when you start looking at what does the Bible really mean, what do these characters really exist, have they ever existed, or is there a message that is hidden within the stories, within the characters? And what I started being gravitated towards was revealing the ancient mysteries. And what I found is that yes, there is a message, and that message is nothing like what the mainstream are telling us. The likes of the Great Pyramids were never a tomb for pharaohs. The likes of Jesus Christ, Mary Magdalene, Mary and Joseph, Noah and Moses were never real people. They are metaphors for a deeper mystical thing, which is ourself, that is now beyond us. And the writers of the Bible have encrypted this in code, in metaphors, and all the other religious books, because it's the same group of people that have written the different religious books. So they've changed the name of the gods, they've changed the name of the prophets, but nevertheless the meaning remained the same. They just catered for different cultures, for different religious beliefs. And you know, the likes of Stonehenge is not what we've been told. Did Atlantis and Lemuria exist? Not in the way in which we've been told. It's all to do with our inner consciousness, as is Jesus Christ, as in all of these biblical characters. So certainly the last few years of my life, certainly more finely tuned and more advanced in the last couple of years, and even more so in the last 6 months, have been finely tuning how all of these ancient cultures were connected. And not only do you find that ancient cultures are completely connected because they are giving us the same knowledge base, but their monoliths may well be a different shape, but nevertheless they are encrypted with the same message, whether that's a Mayan pyramid, an Egyptian pyramid, a Bosnian pyramid, whether that's Atlantis, Lemuria, whether that's the Bible, whether that's a large head of Easter Island. All of these things, they were speaking from the same knowledge base. Even the famous Anunnaki story within the UFO community. The Anunnaki story is completely misrepresented by the likes of Zachariah Sitchin. And again, as part of this ongoing documentary, we will go more into detail about all of these things that I've just mentioned. But suffice to say, all of these ancient cultures are connected by a common message, and that common message is one of enlightenment and human potential. Now, whether it's Sumeria, Egypt, Maya, Bosnia, Tiwanakan, regardless of where it is, it's the same encoded message. Whether it's the Quran, the Bible, the Granth, whichever religious book you wish to read, it is the same common message. Not only is there a connection between the ancient cultures of the Earth, but there's also a connection between the monoliths of Earth and the monoliths of other planets. And there's a mathematical proof that there is either the same civilization that was travelling interstellar, or there are two separate civilizations that had contact with each other. And again, during the course of this documentary, we can go into that and we can show mathematical proof that the likes of Mars is connected to Stonehenge, which is connected to the Great Pyramid. So all of these things are not just confined to Earth, they're confined to other planets as well. So all certainly the last 6 and 12 months of my life have been more geared toward revealing these ancient secrets, which is an encoded, encrypted message of human potential and human enlightenment. So the last two books which have been done individually was The Code of Christ, What Religions Should Be Teaching You. Now when you look into this, it explains who these characters really are. It explains the secrecy of the Church, the Vatican, the Church generally, and other religions, about what they know, which is far different to what we know. So you have the exoteric and the esoteric. So that really was the Code of Christ. What is Christ? Who was Christ? And it is not what we're being taught. The latest book of mine, and of course there is another one, because as soon as I finish a book, more information comes to light and it has to be added to another one. Another one has to come. Otherwise there'll be 14 volumes of each book. But this one is Alchemy of the Gods. Now it goes all the way into Egypt, it goes into all of these ancient monoliths that I've been talking about. The whole of the ancient world, planet Mars, alchemy. When you look at the word priest, it comes from Magush. Magush comes from Magi, which is magician. So the ancient priests were magicians and they were alchemists, and that is highly relevant in these two books, because Alchemy of the Gods, Al is God, Chem is Egypt. Alchemy is the chemistry of God. And there's lots of secrets in this book about who the likes of Satan is, who Lucifer is, who Jesus is, what the pyramids were really built for, why do we have Stonehenge, all of these ancient sites that are famous around the world and beyond the world. It gives you the answers to what their purpose really is and who may have put them there. The foreword was written by sort of a leading researcher and international speaker, Mary Rodwell, who now lives in Australia, but she agreed to do the foreword. And the likes of such things as Your Level of Research is Astounding and Alchemy of the Gods is fascinating, a compelling read, and Mary did the foreword for that, and she is the founder of the likes of CERN, which is an Australian UFO group, and she's an international, well-renowned top researcher. So to get her to do and to endorse that was sort of a real privilege and an honour to get her to do that. So that is really my last two offerings. There will be another one probably in 2020, which is all to do with the science of consciousness and the matrix mind, but that is now starting to develop and starting to come through.